Vasha towered over the assembly, her presence commanding attention. As a member of the sarak, a species known across the galaxy for their immense size and unmatched strength, she had grown accustomed to reverence and fear. To her, humans were merely an afterthought, a tiny, inconsequential species that posed no real threat. The idea that these frail creatures could hold any significance was laughable. Vasha's perception of humans was shaped by the stories passed down among her kind, stories that painted humans as weak and primitive, barely worth a mention in the grand tapestry of the universe. The sarak home planet, Sarak, was a world of giants. Towering spires pierced the sky, built by hands that could crush mountains. The sarak society was one of strength and power, where the worth of an individual was measured by their physical prowess and ability to dominate. Smaller species were often enslaved or ignored, seen as nothing more than tools or nuisances. The sarak took pride in their superiority, looking down on other races with disdain. To them, the universe was theirs to conquer, and those who were smaller, weaker, or less advanced were of no consequence. Vasha's role in the sarak hierarchy was one of enforcer and overseer. She was sent to various parts of the galaxy to ensure compliance with sarak demands, often dealing with species who resisted their rule. When she received orders to oversee a situation involving humans, she nearly laughed. How could these tiny beings possibly pose a challenge? With a dismissive wave, she accepted the assignment, more out of curiosity than any real sense of duty. She wanted to see these humans up close, to confirm for herself just how insignificant they were. Her first encounter with the humans did little to change her mind. The humans, clad in their strange suits and wielding their primitive tools, looked up at her with a mix of determination and fear. Vasha could barely suppress a smirk. They were so small, so fragile. She watched as they moved about, organizing themselves with a level of precision that was almost amusing. What could they possibly hope to achieve? Their weapons looked pitiful compared to the mighty sarak armaments, their bodies frail compared to the sarak's immense bulk. To Vasha, it was as if children were playing at being soldiers. The humans tried to communicate with her, their voices tiny and almost imperceptible. Vasha didn't bother to listen. Instead, she mocked their attempts, her booming laughter echoing across the barren landscape. She made no effort to hide her contempt, towering over them with an air of superiority. The humans were unfazed, continuing their efforts despite her ridicule. This persistence only fueled her derision. She couldn't fathom why they were even trying. What did they think they could accomplish? It was as if they were completely oblivious to their own limitations. As Vasha continued to observe, however, something began to gnaw at the back of her mind. The humans were small, yes, but there was something unsettling about the way they moved, the way they worked together with such precision. She dismissed the thought almost as soon as it arose. These were humans, after all. There was no way they could be a real threat. But still, a tiny seed of doubt had been planted. The situation Vasha was overseeing was growing more complex. Reports started coming in of unusual human activities, strange maneuvers that didn't quite make sense to her. They were planning something, but what? Vasha remained skeptical, convinced that whatever the humans were up to would ultimately fail. But she couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. Perhaps, just perhaps, she had underestimated them. The idea was ridiculous, and yet it lingered, refusing to be fully dismissed. Vasha's disbelief remained firm, but the stage was set for a confrontation that would challenge everything she knew. As she watched the humans continue their preparations, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen, something that would force her to confront the possibility that these tiny beings were more than they appeared. The thought irritated her, but she pushed it aside. There was no way humans could truly be a threat, was there? Vasha received new orders to oversee an ongoing situation involving humans, her mind still clouded with the same dismissive thoughts that had colored her previous encounters. The mission brief mentioned escalating tensions, but she couldn't fathom how these frail creatures could stir up anything truly dangerous. As she arrived at the outpost, her massive form casting a shadow over the command center, she observed the humans setting up their defenses with an intensity that struck her as almost laughable. Surely, whatever conflict was brewing here would be over swiftly, and she would return to her other duties. But something about the atmosphere was different. There was an underlying tension she couldn't quite place. As the hours passed, Vasha began to notice a pattern in the humans' movements, one that deviated from the chaotic scurrying she had expected. Their actions were calculated, precise, and coordinated in a way that suggested deeper strategy. The more she observed, the more she realized they were not reacting to the situation but rather shaping it, guiding it according to their own plans. They moved in sync, communicating silently and effectively, their every action serving a clear purpose. It was then that the first wave of their attack came, not in the form of brute force but through technology and tactics that caught the Sarak forces off guard. Vasha watched as human drones, far more advanced than she had anticipated, swarmed the battlefield, disabling Sarak weaponry with targeted precision. Their attacks were not the wild flailings of a desperate species, but the calculated strikes of a force that understood its enemy's weaknesses. The humans had anticipated every Sarak move, countering them with methods that seemed almost impossible for a species she had so thoroughly dismissed. As the Sarak forces scrambled to respond, it became clear that the humans were no longer merely defending, they were taking control of the battlefield. Vasha felt a pang of disbelief as the humans executed maneuvers that pushed her kind back, forcing them to retreat from positions they had held with ease just hours before. Despite the evidence before her, Vasha's pride would not allow her to fully acknowledge what was happening. She attributed the human success to luck, or perhaps to some hidden assistance from another, more formidable species. She ridiculed her subordinates for their panic, insisting that this was merely a temporary setback, that the humans would soon exhaust whatever tricks they had up their sleeves. Vasha herself remained aloof, refusing to engage directly, as if to do so would be to admit that these tiny beings posed a legitimate threat. Her mockery continued, even as the situation grew more dire, with her refusal to recognize the gravity of the conflict blinding her to the unfolding reality. Yet, beneath her dismissive exterior, doubt began to creep in. Reports from other fronts were coming in, all echoing the same unsettling narrative. The humans were not just surviving, they were winning. Vasha's superiors sent increasingly urgent messages, urging her to take this situation seriously, to adapt their strategies in response to this unexpected turn of events. But she continued to dismiss these warnings, convinced that the human success was a fluke, a statistical anomaly that would soon correct itself. However, there was a growing sense of unease within her ranks, a fear that perhaps these tiny creatures were not to be taken so lightly. As the humans pressed their advantage, Vasha began to sense that something even greater was on the horizon. Their actions suggested a plan that went beyond mere survival, a plan that involved a level of strategic foresight she had not credited them with possessing. There were whispers among her troops, rumors of a final human gambit that could turn the tide completely. Vasha dismissed these rumors as the fearful musings of those who lacked her strength and resolve, yet she could not fully banish the feeling that something was coming, something that would force her to confront the possibility that she had gravely underestimated the tiny beings she had mocked for so long. The battle had reached its zenith, and Vasha stood at the command center, her eyes narrowing as she watched the humans execute a maneuver that defied all logic. The Sarak forces were entrenched, their defensive lines thought impenetrable. But the humans, with their seemingly insignificant numbers, had devised a strategy that bypassed the Sarak's strongest points, striking directly at their core. Vasha's disbelief turned to shock as she witnessed her forces falter, the once invincible Sarak line crumbling under the precise and relentless human assault. In mere moments, the tide of the battle shifted entirely in favor of the humans, their victory sealed by a final, devastating blow that left the Sarak forces in disarray. The shockwaves of this defeat rippled through the Sarak ranks, sending them into retreat, their confidence shattered. As the realization of what had just occurred began to sink in, Vasha found herself grappling with a truth she had long denied. The humans had not only survived but had outmaneuvered and outthought the Sarak at every turn. Their victory was not a fluke or a lucky break, it was the result of careful planning, resilience, and a level of ingenuity that Vasha had not believed them capable of. She stared at the battlefield, now littered with the remnants of Sarak defenses, and felt a creeping sense of admiration for these beings she had so thoroughly underestimated. Yet, even as she acknowledged their victory, a part of her clung to the belief that this was an anomaly, that the sarak would regroup and crush the humans in due time. But the evidence before her was undeniable. The humans had won, and they had done so with a brilliance that defied everything she had believed. Vasha's mind was a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts and emotions. She had always prided herself on being a member of the mightiest species in the galaxy, one that ruled through sheer power and dominance. Yet here she was, witnessing the downfall of her forces at the hands of creatures she had mocked and dismissed as insignificant. Her superiority complex, ingrained through years of sarak indoctrination, fought against the reality she was now forced to confront. How could being so small, so weak by her standards, have achieved such a feat? The more she tried to rationalize it, the more the foundation of her beliefs began to crumble. Vasha was torn between the need to maintain her sense of superiority and the undeniable truth that the humans were far more formidable than she had ever imagined. This internal struggle left her feeling adrift, her confidence shaken for the first time in her life. The moment of realization came with a force that Vasha could not ignore. As she stood in the aftermath of the battle, a new message came through the command center, one that sent a chill down her spine. The humans were not done. They had planned another strike, one that would target the very heart of sarak power. Vasha's eyes widened as she grasped the implications. This was no longer a battle of strength, it was a war of wits, and the humans were proving themselves masters of the game. The cliffhanger left her in a state of paralyzing fear and uncertainty. For the first time, Vasha truly understood the depth of the threat posed by these tiny beings. Her prejudices and preconceptions were shattered, replaced by a gnawing fear that the humans might succeed where no other species had. The next move would determine not just the fate of the battle, but the future of the sarak themselves. Vasha approached the final confrontation with a newfound wariness, her earlier confidence now tempered by the harsh reality she had been forced to acknowledge. The humans had proven themselves far more resourceful and resilient than she had ever imagined, yet a part of her still clung to the belief that the sarak could prevail. She prepared meticulously, analyzing every detail, every possible strategy the humans might employ. This time, she would not underestimate them. But despite her best efforts, there was a tension in the air that she could not shake, a feeling that the humans were always one step ahead, their plans unfolding in ways she could not predict. The weight of her responsibility pressed heavily on her, and she knew that this battle would determine everything. The final battle began with a ferocity that stunned even Vasha. The humans unleashed a series of attacks that were both innovative and devastating, their strategies pushing the sarak forces to their limits. Vasha watched in disbelief as the humans coordinated their assault with precision, using a combination of advanced technology and tactical genius that outmatched the sarak at every turn. The battlefield became a chaotic scene of destruction, with sarak strongholds falling one by one under the relentless human advance. The humans had anticipated every countermeasure, every defensive maneuver, leaving the sarak forces scrambling to keep up. Vasha could only watch as her meticulously planned strategies crumbled in the face of the humans' relentless ingenuity. It was as if the humans had predicted her every move, turning her strengths into weaknesses and exploiting every flaw in the sarak's defenses. As the battle raged on, Vasha found herself confronting a truth she had long denied. The humans were not just surviving, they were winning. With every passing moment, it became clear that the sarak were no longer in control. The humans had taken the fight to them, and they were losing ground rapidly. The realization hit Vasha with the force of a sledgehammer. Her species, for all their power and arrogance, had underestimated these tiny beings, and it was costing them dearly. This was not a defeat in the traditional sense. Vasha herself remained unscathed, her physical strength undiminished. But as she watched her forces fall, as she saw the sarak's once mighty empire being dismantled piece by piece, she understood that this was a defeat of a far greater magnitude. The humans had exposed the sarak's hubris, their blind belief in their own superiority, and had turned it against them. Vasha's defeat was not just a personal failure, it was the downfall of everything she had believed in. In the aftermath of the battle, as the dust began to settle, Vasha stood amidst the ruins of her people's pride. The humans had achieved what no other species had dared to attempt. They had brought the sarak to their knees. And now, Vasha was left to face the consequences of her actions, the mockery and arrogance that had led her to this point. The weight of her failure was crushing, and she knew that she would have to answer for it. But more than that, she realized that her society, with all its strength and power, would have to reckon with the truth. They were not invincible, and their arrogance had blinded them to the real dangers in the universe. The stage was set for a resolution that would change everything, not just for Vasha, but for the entire sarak race. The humans had proven themselves, and in doing so, they had forced Vasha and her people to confront the harsh reality of their own limitations. In the aftermath of the battle, the once proud sarak forces were left to pick up the pieces of their shattered pride. The battlefield, now eerily silent, stood as a testament to their defeat. Vasha, standing amidst the ruins, felt the weight of their loss more acutely than anyone. The sarak had never known such a humbling moment, and the reality of their downfall was hard to grasp. Reports flowed in from other fronts, all echoing the same grim truth: the humans had outmaneuvered, outthought, and outlasted them. The mighty sarak, who had once ruled through sheer force, were now forced to confront the fact that their strength had not been enough. The very foundation of their society, built on the belief of their invincibility, was now shaken to its core. Vasha could no longer deny what had been in front of her all along. The humans, whom she had mocked and dismissed as insignificant, had proven themselves not just capable, but extraordinary. Their resilience, their strategic brilliance, and their refusal to yield had won them a victory that no one in the galaxy could have predicted. Vasha began to reflect on her own journey, from her initial arrogance and disdain to the sobering realization of her errors. She saw now that true strength was not just about physical power, but about adaptability, intelligence, and the willingness to learn from one's mistakes. The humans had demonstrated all these qualities, and in doing so, they had forced her to grow, to see beyond the narrow lens of superiority that had blinded her for so long. Vasha knew that this experience had changed her, that she could no longer return to the way she had been before. She had been humbled, and in that humility, she found a newfound respect for those she once scorned. From the human's perspective, the victory was not one of triumphalism but of survival and necessity. They had not fought to conquer but to defend their place in the galaxy, to prove that they were not to be underestimated. Their strategies had been born out of desperation, their victories out of determination and unity. As they looked at the aftermath, there was no celebration, only a quiet acknowledgement of what they had achieved. The humans understood the weight of their actions, the ripple effects that would now spread throughout the galaxy. They had shown the universe that they were a force to be reckoned with, but they also knew that this victory had come at a cost. The scars of battle, both physical and emotional, would take time to heal, and the knowledge that they had brought a mighty empire to its knees was as sobering as it was empowering. As the story drew to a close, the events left a lasting reflection on the nature of strength and the dangers of underestimation. Vasha's journey, from arrogance to humility, mirrored the broader lesson that power alone is not enough to ensure victory. The sarak's downfall was a reminder that those who are dismissed as insignificant often possess strengths that are unseen and unappreciated until it is too late. The humans, in their quiet resilience, had taught a powerful lesson to the galaxy: that true strength lies not in the size of one's forces but in the heart, mind, and spirit of those who refuse to be defeated. The story leaves the reader with a deep sense of the complexities of power, the importance of respect for all beings, and the understanding that the smallest of creatures can have the greatest impact when their strength is fully realized.